All right, well, my name is Paul Klassen. I'm the CEO of Pinnacle Group here in Calgary. Today we're going to talk about basement renovations and the costs associated with them here in Calgary. Three types of basements we're going to address here today. One is a new home, so a current home that's not been developed. Secondly would be an older home that requires a development, a complete demo and reframe. And then thirdly would be a secondary suite. So if you've recently purchased a home that has an unfinished basement, so it's a relatively new home, those costs range between $60,000 and $90,000 depending on the complexity and of course the product that's put into that space. If the current bathroom is roughed in, for example, that diminishes cost. If you have to add the rough in, add $3,000 to $5,000. If you're going to remove some teleposts for a freespan beam, custom home theater, or wet bar, dry bar, all those things would add to the cost. So you'd be high five figures, low six figures for a project like that. So on an older home, there's a couple of complexities that come to play. First of all, code requirements. So your wiring likely isn't up to code, the exterior studding likely isn't up to code. So all of that typically has to be redone. Sometimes those old homes are very poorly insulated, so we use a product called spray foam. So a lot of those components come into play. The other thing is teleposts. So the teleposts restrict your ability to have an open area. So if you're adding a beam, for example, between $4,000 and $6,000 for a beam, depending on the span and the point load. But in a case like that, really tough to develop a complete basement. So essentially we're demolishing the current basement, starting from scratch. We're into high five figures, low six figures. So I would say in the 90s to low 110s would be my budget range for a basement like that. All right, so now we're talking about secondary suites. Secondary suites are a whole different animal. So secondary suites may require an external stairwell, for example. If you don't need an exterior stairwell, you know that would affect the price, obviously. But a secondary suite typically is going to be in the mid 150s to high 100s. That's kind of how I let my clients know that particular area, because there are just so many parts and pieces. Your heating component, your HVAC, your fire separation, all of those things have to be taken into account. So quite a bit more cost for that. If you're adding a stairwell, you could easily add $15,000 for an exterior stairwell. Things like open concepts. So if you want to remove teleposts, I typically tell clients $3,000 to $5,000, maybe $4,000 to $6,000 for a clear span beam, depending on point loads and span. But those are kind of rough numbers to give you a feel for a secondary suite here in Calgary.